Hello, this is Ludwig and I'm joined by Sinan Kuba.
Hello.
We're talking about The Evil Within, which is a new survival horror game coming from Bethesda. It's notable for being from the creator of Resident Evil, Shinji Mikami, and it looks to be much like that. Do you think this is a Resident Evil successor? Do you feel like this is following on from those creepy, dreadful footsteps?
There's definitely elements of Resident Evil to the game, most notably in the kind of basic mechanics, in the way that you move, the way that you shoot, the way that enemies creep up on you. There's one scene that we were both talking about where about 7 or 8 enemies just suddenly pile up on you in this kind of creepy basement, which is basically a river of blood with a few platforms, and they're all slowly inching towards you, and you suddenly feel very cornered. It's very reminiscent of those scenes in Resident Evil games where you feel overwhelmed and claustrophobic. But at the same time, the tone is markedly different, wouldn't you say?
I would. It has a more serious tone. I think a lot of this is because of the game's presentation. I think the graphics are really well done. It's very atmospheric. The entire game is in a filmic aspect ratio. It's ultra wide. But then when characters talk, and the main character is Sebastian, he's a detective who seems to be having hallucinations quite frequently. Whenever the characters converse, it falls back into sort of a B-movie vibe, and I don't think that really gels with the game.
Yeah, I think it genuinely creeped me out, especially the second chapter where we played, where you're going through a mansion that's actually a lot like the first mansion in Resident Evil, but the way you go around it is more open-ended. The thing that really caught me out was there's a figure who, I don't know if it's limited to that part of the game or if he comes through in other parts of the game. It's a kind of ghostly apparition who's meant to be the guy who was in this mansion, who grew up in this mansion, and he just randomly appears from time to time, and if he finds you, if you don't run away from him, he'd take your health down to its most minimum, 1 HP or whatever that could be. And so you have to run away. That forces you to run away, and of course by running away you don't know where you're running to, and that really caught me off guard as a kind of unusual but interesting way of keeping you on your toes.
That's what I liked about this demo that I played, in that it is very good at unsettling you just as you're falling into a rut. I think having enemies that are not possible to kill or that you have to run away from make you panic and you start making mistakes. I often ran through traps in the game when I was being chased, and I think the game's creatures or its monsters are very good at making you feel panicked. You feel unsettled. You don't want to be near them. That is just your instinctive response. Never mind the fact that you're about to die and lose your progress. They're just so horrible to look at that you don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah, one of the excellent things that I really appreciated about Resident Evil 4 was with the boss fights where, like you say, you had to run away rather than confront them. Now, there's a couple of them in Resident Evil 4 which really stand out, and there's one in the first chapter that we played where you're just coming into the hospice, where there's this kind of bizarre boss who's a cross between a spider and the girl from The Ring, and she just chases you down corridors, and the only thing you can do is run. And there's just some excellent choices in the pacing. There's one excellent moment in particular where you run to the end of a corridor and it looks like it's a dead end, and she's coming towards you, and all of a sudden a door suddenly opens out of nowhere and a zombie stumbles through, and that's your exit. And it's a trick that you can't really do over and over again, but if it's doing things like that, then that's the kind of thing that could make this game really exciting.
And one of the other things that I liked, of course, Resident Evil is often a game about resource management, and this game is no different. In this case, you have matches that you can use to burn the corpses of zombies. Some of them will come back to life, some of them don't. You don't really know which ones, and you're always worried about being caught off guard by one that comes back. But you also don't want to expend the match, like you have a very limited number of them. So I always like coming back to that element of stress, which is you don't know how long the game is, you don't know what you'll need in the future, so you're very protective of the items that you have. But do you think a lot of this stuff is just repeating what we've done before? Is this game not fresh enough?
There's a risk of that, but I think it's the tone that's going to separate this from other Mikami games. You know, Shadows of the Damned, for example, took a very humorous, silly tone, which made it feel different from Resident Evil. This one is going almost the other way, and like you say, being more serious, and maybe there are some issues with that, but there's this hint that the story actually might be genuinely interesting from a kind of psychiatric angle, from a horror angle. So I think that could be the key difference.
Yeah, and I think the monster designs are really stand out so far. It should be we should point out that we've seen this game demonstrated quite a few times, and it never shows very well. It never shows as well as it plays. But now that we've played it, I think we're really starting to see it come together. They've really been focusing on set pieces, and they have all these scenes that take place in the outside world in a ruined, dilapidated city with things crumbling down around you, and it's very spectacular, but it feels very staged. And I think it was important to put the controller in our hands and make us feel or remind us that horror is not about big open spaces falling apart. It's not about the spectacle. It's about the closeness and things that are happening in your face. Like, it should be a very tight, claustrophobic experience. And so far, I feel like that's the promise this game is showing.
The thing you were saying about using the matches, that's something that sounds interesting, but when you're actually there in a situation and you feel like a zombie is suddenly shifting and might wake up, you panically use that match and it's gone. That's something that really only works when you experience it. And again, my worry is how many times the trick's going to work, how long is it going to sustain throughout the whole game. But for the brief amount that we played, there's certainly promise there. It was a bit more open-ended, but just going through, there's I felt genuinely unnerved going through that area, just in terms of I'll start that whole bit again.
It's okay, you can always start over and then it's just edited back in.
And okay, let's wait for the train to go. I hope that's not going to be too noisy. I'm trying to find a word, I'm sorry.